So with the classification of the good herb feeling like it's closer than ever, there's lots of concern about what can happen next. Does Schedule 3 mean that it'll be fully legal? Will it become an FDA regulated medicine only available with a prescription? And will federal penalties finally be wiped clean? So right now, let's dig into it, break down the myths, and what can actually happen if the good herb is reclassified.
The Trump administration is considering reclassifying marijuana on the federal level. Right now, it's a Category 1 drug on the level of heroin and LSD. The change could open up more access to the drug. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson explains what's at stake.
Reducing marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug means cannabis shops will enjoy a reduced tax burden and greater access to banking. It would also expand research opportunities into marijuana's therapeutic potential. The president told reporters it's important to make the right decision because marijuana is a complicated subject.
I've heard great things having to do with medical, and I've had bad things having to do with just about everything else. But medical and, for pain and various things, I've heard some pretty good things. But for other things, I've heard some pretty bad things.
Last year on Truth Social, the president appeared to support reclassification by posting his administration will focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug and support safe banking for state-authorized companies and states' rights to pass marijuana laws. Marijuana is legal in 40 states for medical use. It's lawful to use recreationally in 24 states.
So there are clearly some benefits when it comes to reclassification. Perhaps the biggest one is breaking the stigma, but other issues such as safe banking for companies operating in the industry and also research, those are really big factors as well. Now what we're going to do in today's video is break down some of the good and some of the bad and what can happen if rescheduling actually takes place. And this was actually set out really nicely by Normal in an article posted by my in a moment. So let's start off right here. This is the Controlled Substances Act, which governs everything. It was passed by Congress back in 1970 and classifies certain controlled substances in a distinct regulatory category based on their accepted or lack of medical utility and abuse potential. So currently the good herb is Schedule 1, high potential for abuse and no accepted medical benefits, which is obviously crazy. So let's have a look and see why the good herb even is classed as Schedule 1 in the first place.
Live look in Washington, D.C., where the Department of Justice is recommending a change for one of the world's deadliest drugs. We're talking about marijuana.
The world's
Ron
deadliest?
Trevino explains why marijuana is listed in the same category as drugs like heroin, LSD, and ecstasy.
Why is marijuana listed among the world's deadliest drugs? Since 1972, marijuana has been listed as a Schedule 1 drug by the Drug Enforcement Administration. Schedule 1 drugs are deemed to have no medical use and a high potential for abuse. That means cannabis is in the same category as heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. These categories were created by the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. Schedule 2 drugs have a risk of abuse but also a medical purpose. Those drugs include morphine, cocaine, and oxycodone. Schedule 3 through 5 drugs have a lower risk of abuse and are considered safe and effective in medicine. They include Xanax and Valium. Thanks to these categories, on paper, the federal government considered marijuana more dangerous than oxycodone. But since 1972, researchers have identified several medical uses for THC and CBD, both found in cannabis plants. That means the FDA has approved cannabis-related drugs for everything from seizures to nausea caused by cancer treatment. According to Scientific American, previous efforts to downgrade marijuana to Schedule 3 have run into a serious roadblock. The only way to establish that pot does not have a high potential for abuse is through research. The only federally legal source of cannabis for research is the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is mandated by Congress to study only its harms. Changing pot to a Schedule 3 drug would make it easier for scientists to not only research the potential for abuse, but also its medical uses.
So you guys can see how convoluted all this is. The FDA directs the research, but only into the harms, not to the benefits. And with a plant that has so many benefits, isn't that just a crazy position to take? I personally think so. Now, there have been previous efforts to reclassify the good herb in the past, and I'm going to show you guys that in a bit. But before we do, just a quick reminder, if you're getting value from this video, please do Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support us further, join the ICANN VIP Bean Club or just buy us a cup of coffee. And if you happen to be a home gardener, try the ICANN Organics. Use the code LEGAL. It works on the bundle and the beans.
President Donald Trump and his administration are considering reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug.
22 News reporter Kaylee Thomas joins us live in studio with how this would provide additional revenue to the industry.
Sarah and Nick, the effort to change marijuana from Schedule 1, which the DEA classifies as having no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse, to Schedule 3 began under the Biden administration. A Schedule 3 designation wouldn't legalize marijuana for recreational use, but criminal penalties would be lessened. It would also open new research opportunities. And one of the biggest benefits would be that some cannabis firms would no longer be subject to Section 280E of the U.S. Federal Tax Code. For INSA Cannabis Dispensary in Springfield, being removed from this would let them claim tax credits and deductions for business expenses.
So reclassification is actually something that's been discussed for decades at this point, under previous administrations as well. So it's not just under President Biden or President Trump that this is being discussed. Now, I decided to ask ChatGPT a pretty straightforward question. When in the past has an administrative petition to remove the good herb from Schedule 1 been filed? And it turns out administrative petitions to remove the good herb from Schedule 1 have been filed multiple times since the 1970s. The first petition was back in 1972, the second one was 1995, then we had another one in 2002, and then 2011. Following that was another two in 2016, and then in 2022 we had President Biden's directive, and here we are in 2025 where President Trump's administration is having a look at the reclassification issue once more. Now, what I found really interesting was this bit right here, which says that administrative petitions to reschedule the good herb have been consistently rejected by the DEA up until the 2023 recent HHS recommendation. So it literally took 53 years for us to even get to this point, which is mind-blowing. Now here's the big one, guys. Will reclassifying the good herb from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 provide state governments with the ability to legally regulate the good herb free from federal interference? And this is important because back on the campaign trail, President Trump is on record saying that he supports state rights in relation to this issue. Now this is pretty interesting because according to this, reclassifying the good herb from Schedule 1 to 3 does not provide state governments with the authority to establish regulations that are inconsistent with those established by the federal government. For example, individual states cannot legally decide to permit over-the-counter sales of Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 drugs without running afoul of federal law. So basically, without straight up descheduling, removing it from the list of scheduled substances, those who produce, dispense, possess, or use the good herb in compliance with state laws could still face federal prosecution for violating federal drug laws.
The issue isn't a red state, blue state issue. 44 states plus Washington, D.C. have some kind of legal cannabis use, whether it be highly regulated medicinal use or even recreational for all adults without a prescription. Even with the Fed still taking a strict zero-tolerance policy for weed, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, allowing states to decide certain things for themselves, has given many states the ability to legalize pot without federal involvement. But there are heavy restrictions. I reached out to the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, the primary agency that helps enforce marijuana laws in Oklahoma. In a statement, they tell me they are watching what the White House does, but they did not have anything formal to discuss at this time. Quote, "Many presidents in both parties have talked about this, but in the end, no action has ever been taken. If this is moved to a different schedule, we will also have to wait and see what details will come with the rescheduling."
So clearly there's still some concern and confusion, and a lot of that will have to be addressed if the reclassification does happen. Now let's move on, because will rescheduling make the good herb legal as an FDA-approved medicine? Will rescheduling make it available only via prescription? And this article suggests no, because while rescheduling will be an acknowledgement from the federal government that the good herb possesses currently accepted medical uses in the US, this recognition is actually distinct and completely separate from it being formally endorsed by the FDA, which requires an altogether different approval process. And as a result, rescheduling would not likely mandate the sale of the good herb in pharmacies, which is required for FDA-approved scheduled substances. But that doesn't mean that the FDA will not get involved, because about 7 years ago, the FDA actually approved the first marijuana-based prescription drug. Have a look.
Welcome back. A medical milestone to tell you about. The Food and Drug Administration approved the first ever medication derived from marijuana The medication is used to treat seizures in children. Parents should not be concerned about the kids getting high, apparently. The treatment includes a purified form of a chemical in the cannabis plant, but has no THC. Joining us right now to talk more about it is Dr. Mikhail Varshavsky, better known as Dr. Mike, our favorite physician. Dr. Mike, good to see you. Is this a major development?
Absolutely. I mean, it's time that we start taking a look at the marijuana plant, the cannabis derivative, and trying to find medical uses for it. Enough of natural companies, quote unquote natural companies, making these products without proper supervision. The FDA needs to step in. They need to do proper trials, find out which conditions these things work for, and take the guessing out of a really complex medical situation.
You know, Jack Brewer, who's a former NFL player, has been on this program a lot. He's one of our regulars, and he said we should stop treating NFLers with opioids and instead give them marijuana, because it's not as addictive as an opioid. I mean, is this going to be the kind of thing that spurs more research into cannabis-derived medicine, even though marijuana is federally banned?
Yeah, this is one of the first medications used for these seizure disorders in children, most notably Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, rare forms, but doctors are known to prescribe medications off-label, so oftentimes there could be an FDA indication for one medication for a certain condition, but we see its utility in other forms of seizures. So I can see this medication being used for all sorts of seizures.
So that being said, FDA may get involved, they may not get involved. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But a big question on a lot of people's minds is, will rescheduling amend those federal penalties? Because a lot of people have found themselves in hot water because of the good herb. And it's crazy to think that the most dangerous thing about the good herb is being caught with it. So will rescheduling actually amend those federal penalties? According to this, yes and no. Federal statutes specific to the possession and or trafficking of the good herb per se would not automatically be changed by rescheduling. That's because these statutes and the penalties provided in these statutes are not directly tied to cannabis rescheduling. Amending these statutory penalties will require an act of Congress. Now, that being said, there are many federal laws that penalize the broader possession of Schedule I substances. These include federal prohibitions on one's ability to possess Schedule I substances and legally purchase a firearm or reside in subsidized housing, and moving the good herb to Schedule III will exclude those who possess it from these or other similar federal restrictions that are only there because the good herb is Schedule I. But that being said, if there's still laws like no consumption in public, no blazing up near schools or kids, then you can still find yourself in hot water if you go to a public park and blaze up, like this guy did. Check it out.
This morning, an arrest in 2 parks are raising questions not just about marijuana laws, but about policing tactics and visibility.
Yeah, so users on TikTok say the officers making those arrests last week were in plain clothes and driving unmarked vehicles. 7 News reporter John Gonzalez with us live near DuPont Circle this morning to bring us some answers. John, good morning.
Adam, good morning. Many of the witnesses telling us this was so rare and unusual to see, but we want to be clear this morning here on 7 News. Possessing marijuana in D.C. is legal. It has been for years, but using it in public is not, especially federally mandated land like DuPont Circle. We've actually seen a lot of police out here this morning. Probably has something to do with the shooting that occurred here about 24 hours ago. Now, we are next to Connecticut Avenue here in Northwest, which is run by the district. But once you cross the street into DuPont Circle Park there, that is federal land run by the National Park Service. Look at this.
These are the 3 cops, park police. I've never seen them here before in my life.
Social media users shared those images, this video with us, while U.S. Park Police say they were enforcing the law. Some D.C. residents say what they saw felt unnecessary or even intimidating. Video shows the plainclothes officers wearing vests walking up to people in the park here. 3 people were arrested for having open containers of alcohol and 1 for smoking weed in public. The extra eyes is part of the president's executive order, which aims to make D.C., quote, safe and beautiful, but some say it felt like overkill.
Now, I ain't law enforcement, guys, but there are laws, and a lot of these laws are simple laws. Don't consume in public. No alcohol in public either. I mean, these are things that have been on the books for such a long time. So much so that even if I'm out with my homies, we all know that we should not be drinking in public. It's simple. And if you do, you're likely to get ticketed, arrested, police can heckle you, you're putting yourself in trouble. Now, what I found really goofy was the caption on this image. In DC, they're kidnapping random civilians. Like, are they really kidnapping civilians? If police officers are conducting arrests and someone is thrown in handcuffs and put in a police van, that's not them being kidnapped. Come on. Because think of it this way. If someone were to rob a bank and the police were to pull up on him, put him in handcuffs and throw him in a van, would you say that the police was kidnapping the bank robber? It's all pretty freaking goofy. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think that people should be criminalized for consuming the good herb, but if there are laws such as no consumption in public in a park where often children will be hanging out and playing, then obviously just don't do it. And it seems that DC in particular is in the spotlight because of some of the stuff that's happening down there. Now I've been to DC myself, it does feel like in the city there's a bit of crime, so trying to clean things up doesn't really seem that much of a bad idea. Now that being said, there are a lot of people, a lot of news outlets that say rescheduling would make it so much easier for scientists to conduct research into the good herb. But is that actually the case? And according to this article it says probably not. And that's something that I've always echoed. Scientists can and do conduct clinical trials involving the good herb right now. And that's exactly what I said. We've been doing research into this plant already. In legal states like California and Colorado, they've established state-sponsored programs dedicated to conducting clinical cannabis research. But the problem is that the approval process for these trials is unduly onerous. And rescheduling is likely to do very little in streamlining this process. So it seems to me that a lot of this comes down to the bureaucracy and the red tape. There's way too many impediments in place, such as requiring clinical protocols to be approved by the US Attorney General and requiring some of these products to be sourced from federally licensed, not state licensed vendors. But that being said, one of the biggest benefits that people in the industry will be able to obtain is in relation to traditional tax deductions. So things like safe banking, taxes, and tax deductions will be a big move for a lot of folks. And finally, something that a lot of folks will be concerned about is whether reclassification will mandate health insurance companies to finally reimburse patients for their medical cannabis related expenses.
New regulations on medical marijuana going into effect next year. There have been a lot of questions about how that process will work. Dallas asked, will my health insurance cover medical marijuana? Here's Victor Puente with the answer to that good question.
At the federal level, marijuana is still an illegal Schedule I drug, which means insurance will not cover it. The AARP says Medicare also won't cover medical marijuana. The Kentucky Office of Medical Cannabis says, quote, we are not aware of any insurance that will cover medical cannabis, but patients are encouraged to contact their providers. The company GoodRx says because of its status at the federal level, technically physicians cannot write a prescription for medical marijuana. Depending on the state, you may get a referral or recommendation. In Kentucky, you will receive what's called a written certification. It's very similar to a prescription, but insurance won't cover it.
So evidently that can be a little bit of a problem. We have to wait to see how that turns out. But according to this, in some medical states, patients are already eligible for reimbursement related to the use of the medical herb in certain circumstances, such as recovering from a workplace-related injury. While in other states, the courts have ruled that patients are explicitly ineligible because the good herb remains federally prohibited. So like I said, we'll just have to wait and see because it remains unclear whether rescheduling will provide any further clarity to either patients or to health insurance providers with respect to this matter. But let me know what you guys think about all that. Do you guys think rescheduling is something that we should pursue or not, especially based on all the things that I've discussed in this video? Drop it in the comments down below and let me know. Now, if you're a grower and you missed our last episode, you may want to check it out because what's happening is really crazy. Cops are deploying drones to destroy grows. Check it out, it's absolutely crazy. That video is coming up right now.